I'm Brittany, 34 years old, and I work as a pediatric oncology nurse. For 8 years, I saved every dollar I could to finally buy my modest home. Growing up, I always knew I was second best compared to my brother Tyler, but nothing could have prepared me for what my parents did years later, giving him a $950,000 house and then showing up at my door demanding I sign over my own home. When I refused, my dad slapped me across the face. What happened next changed everything. Before I share the full story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you can join our community of survivors and thrivers. I grew up in suburban Seattle. My parents, Harold and Martha, never tried to hide that Tyler, 3 years younger than me, was their favorite. This wasn't just normal sibling jealousy. It was a deep, constant pattern. Every achievement of mine was brushed aside. When I made the honor roll, they would nod briefly and then quickly turn the conversation to Tyler making the junior varsity football team. When I won the regional science fair, my mom barely showed up, leaving early because Tyler had a regular season game the same day. "Brittany, you have to understand," my dad would say. "Your brother has real potential. Sports can lead to scholarships. Your little science projects don't really lead anywhere." Those words cut deep. From the time I was 10, I dreamed of becoming a nurse. I loved science and wanted to help people, but in my family's eyes, it never mattered. When college applications came, I was accepted into several strong nursing programs. My mom looked at the letters and said, "That's nice, honey, but how will you pay for it? We need to save for Tyler's education. He'll probably get scholarships, but we have to be ready." That night, I cried alone in my room, feeling crushed by their dismissal. My best friend Allison, who I'd known since kindergarten, stepped in. "Your parents should believe in you," she said. "If they don't, then I will." She helped me find scholarships and loans. With her support, I pulled together enough financial aid to attend nursing school. I worked 20 hours a week in a campus cafe while keeping a 3.9 GPA. Meanwhile, Tyler got a fully funded ride to a state university from our parents, even with his average grades. When he dropped out after 3 semesters, they simply said, "College isn't for everyone." Tyler drifted for years, trying out jobs until he decided to start a restaurant supply business. He had no experience, but my parents handed him $50,000. When it failed, they called it a learning experience and gave him even more money to try real estate. During those same years, I finished nursing school, passed my boards on the first attempt, and earned a position at Seattle Children's Hospital in pediatric oncology. The work was hard, but it gave me purpose. One of my mentors, Dr. Eleanor, told me after I comforted a frightened 8-year-old patient, "Some people have skills, but not the heart. You have both." Her encouragement meant the world to me because I never got that from my parents. While my career grew, I lived frugally in a tiny studio apartment, saving every cent. I skipped vacations, took extra shifts, and after 8 years, I finally had enough for a down payment on a small 3-bedroom home near the hospital. The day I held the keys was the proudest day of my life. Allison came over with a bottle of champagne. We sat in the empty living room celebrating. "You did this all on your own," she said, "without the people who should have helped you most." Over the next 2 years, I turned the house into my home. I painted the walls, searched thrift shops for furniture, and planted a small garden in the backyard. My home was my sanctuary, a symbol of every sacrifice I had made. My parents rarely visited. When they did, I only criticized. "This neighborhood seems to be going downhill," my mom remarked once, even though it was safe and welcoming. My neighbor Diana, a retired teacher, became like family to me. Over tea, she would often say, "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into." I didn't realize then how true her words would become. 3 years after I bought my home, my parents invited me for a family dinner. My mom's voice was unusually cheerful when she said they had exciting news. I arrived at their house, the same one I grew up in, right at 5 p.m. Tyler came in shortly after, all charm and swagger, even though he hadn't achieved much. Since high school, at dinner, I noticed my mom had cooked all of Tyler's favorite foods. None of mine. By now, I expected that. Halfway through, my dad tapped his glass. "Your mother and I have some big news," he said proudly. "We've sold the house." I assumed they were downsizing. "That makes sense," I said. "Are you moving to a condo?" My dad chuckled. No. We actually already closed on the sale. Got $950,000. "Wow, that's great," I said. Honestly, my mom then turned to Tyler with glowing eyes. "And we're giving all of it to Tyler for his new home?" The words felt like a physical punch. Every dollar of their home sale, $950,000 given to him. My dad smiled at me. "Isn't that wonderful?" Tyler found the perfect property. 5 bedrooms, a home theater, a pool, all in Bellevue. Tyler grinned smugly. "It's amazing, sis. Way better than your little starter place." My cheeks burned, but I stayed calm. "That's generous. But where will you and Mom live?" "We'll figure it out," my mom said casually. "Maybe rent for a while, but what about your retirement plans?" I asked. "You always talked about traveling." My dad waved me off. "Tyler's future is more important. His current place is too small for a man of his stature and business." I bit my tongue, refusing to point out his business was barely surviving. I almost asked, "What about me?" But I didn't. The words stayed stuck in my throat loud in the silence. Even if unspoken. After that dinner, I drove home in silence. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they hurt. My parents had just handed my brother nearly $1 million while I was left invisible once again. Still, I told myself it was their money to do what they wanted. If they wanted to risk their future for Tyler, that was their choice, but I never imagined what would happen next. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, my parents were standing there, both looking serious. My dad didn't waste time. "Brittany, we need to talk inside." I let them in, my stomach tight. We sat in my living room, the same one I had worked so hard to furnish. My dad cleared his throat. "We've been thinking about your situation. It doesn't make sense for you to have this house. Tyler needs more space. You're single, no kids. You don't really need all this." I stared at him, not sure I'd heard correctly. "Are you saying you want me to give my house to Tyler?" "Yes," my mom said matter-of-factly. "We think it's the best solution. You can always rent a small apartment closer to the hospital." "You don't need a full house." My chest tightened. I worked for 8 years to save for this place. I sacrificed everything for it. You can't seriously expect me to just hand it over. My father's face hardened. "Don't be selfish. Your brother has a family to think about. You don't sign the deed over to us and we'll transfer it to him." I felt my blood boil. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "This is my home. I bought it. I worked for it. I will never give it up." The room fell into a heavy silence. Then, in a flash, my father's hand came across my face. The slap was so hard it stung my skin and rang in my ears. I gasped, tears springing to my eyes, not just from the pain, but from the betrayal. My own father hitting me like I was nothing. "Harold," my mother said sharply, but she didn't move to help me. Instead, she looked at me coldly. "You're being dramatic. Just sign the papers and this will all be settled." I stood up, my voice shaking but strong. "Get out of my house, now." My dad's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, my hand still pressed to my burning cheek. "The only thing I regret is ever thinking I could count on you." They left without another word, slamming the door behind them. I locked it and collapsed onto the couch, my whole body trembling. That night, I called Allison. She rushed over, holding me as I cried. "You are not alone," she whispered. "They can't take what you built. This house is yours. And so is your future." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood after that. My neighbor Diana, who had become like family, came by with cookies and comfort. "You deserve better," she told me. "Real family doesn't treat you like this. We've got your back." And she meant it. Over the next few weeks, my neighbors kept an eye on my house, making sure I felt safe. Tyler and my parents tried calling, but I didn't answer. I knew now that their love was conditional, built only on what I could give or what I could sacrifice for Tyler. It hurt, but it also freed me. For the first time, I truly understood Diana's words. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. I poured myself even deeper into my work at the hospital. The kids I cared for reminded me daily what real courage looked like. My patients and coworkers became part of the family I had always wanted, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could hand over. Looking back now, I realized that slap was the final break. Painful as it was, it pushed me to let go of the hope that my parents would ever change. Instead, I chose myself, my home, my peace, my future. And that's something no one can ever take away from me. "What about what my mother asked?" her tone slightly defensive. I shook my head. "Nothing. Congratulations, Tyler. That is quite a gift." Tyler raised his glass. "To Mom and Dad, the best parents anyone could ask for." They clinketed glasses while I sat there feeling invisible yet again. I excused myself to use the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and took several deep breaths. I reminded myself that I was a grown woman with my own life, my own career, my own home. I did not need their validation or their money. Still, it hurt deeply to see such blatant favoritism. It was not about the money itself, but what it represented. Once again, my parents were showing me exactly where I stood in their estimation. I returned to the table and managed to get through the rest of dinner on autopilot, nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals while feeling completely detached from the conversation. As soon as dessert was finished, I made an excuse about an early shift and left. The next day, I called Allison and told her what had happened. She was furious on my behalf. "Are you kidding me? They gave him the entire amount, nearly $1 million, while you worked your butt off for every penny of your down payment." "It is their money," I said, trying to sound more okay with it than I felt. "They can do what they want with it." "That is not the point, and you know it," Allison replied. "It is about fairness, about recognizing both their children. They could have at least given you something too." I sighed, feeling the weight of a lifetime of being second best. I stopped expecting fairness from them a long time ago. 2 weeks later, Tyler invited me to see his new home. I almost declined, but decided that seeing it might help me process and move on. The house was exactly as described, a sprawling mansion in one of Belle's most prestigious neighborhoods. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a professional kitchen media room, and a backyard with a built-in pool and outdoor kitchen. Tyler gave me the grand tour, pointing out features with the pride of someone who had earned every square inch through hard work rather than parental generosity. My parents were there, too, fawning over the house as if it were a grandchild. "What do you think?" Tyler asked me as we stood on his expansive back deck overlooking Lake Washington. I thought about my own home, which could fit in just the first floor of this mansion. I thought about the years of saving, the extra shifts, the careful budgeting. I thought about how my parents had never even brought me a housewarming gift. "It is beautiful," I said finally. Because it was true. "You were very lucky." Tyler frowned slightly at my choice of words. "Luck has nothing to do with it. I have worked hard to get where I am. I nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of his statement, but managed to contain myself. Of course, I said instead, congratulations. As I drove home that evening, the contrast between our situations struck me forcefully. But rather than feeling sorry for myself, I felt a strange sense of pride. My home might be smaller and less impressive, but it was truly mine earned through my own efforts and determination. No one could take that away from me, or so I thought. 3 months after Tyler moved into his mansion, I was enjoying a rare weekend day off. The morning had been peaceful, spent tending to my garden and reading on the porch swing I had recently installed. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Looking up, I recognized my parents' sedan. This was unusual as they rarely visited without calling first. I set my book aside and walked down to greet them, noticing immediately that something seemed off. My father's posture was rigid, and my mother's smile looked forced. "This is a surprise," I said as they approached. "Is everything okay? Can we come in?" My father asked, ignoring my question. "We need to talk about something important." I led them into my living room, offering drinks, which they declined. We sat awkwardly for a moment before my father cleared his throat. "Brittany, your mother and I have found ourselves in a difficult situation." He began, his tone businesslike. "As you know, we sold our house and gave the proceeds to Tyler." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Well, we have been renting a small apartment, but it is very expensive and frankly not suitable for us long term. Have you started looking for something more permanent?" I asked, still not seeing where this was going. My mother fidgeted with her purse strap. "That is what we wanted to talk to you about. We have been thinking about our options, and we believe we have come up with the perfect solution." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "We want you to sign your house over to us," my father stated bluntly. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "I am sorry. What? This house?" He gestured around my living room. "We want you to sign it over to us. We can move in here and you can find an apartment. You are young, single. You do not need all this space." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline to what surely must be a joke. When none came, I found my voice. "You cannot be serious." "We are absolutely serious," my mother said, leaning forward. "It makes perfect sense. We helped raise you, put food on the table, clothes on your back. Now we need help, and this is how you can repay us." I felt as though I had stepped into an alternate reality. "Mom, Dad, this is my house. I saved for years for the down payment. I pay the mortgage every month. I cannot just give it to you." "You would not be giving it to us," my father countered. "You would be repaying your debt to us. Do you have any idea how much it costs to raise you, to feed you, clothe? You put a roof over your head for 18 years. That was your obligation as parents," I replied, feeling a surge of anger. "You chose to have children. I did not ask to be born." My father's face wrinkled. "Do not talk to me about obligation. You have an obligation to care for your parents. It is what decent children do." "I am happy to help you find a place within your budget," I offered, trying to remain calm. "Maybe I could help with a security deposit or a first month's rent somewhere." "We do not want your charity," my mother snapped. "We want this house. You have a good job you can afford to rent." "What about Tyler?" I asked. "He has a huge house now thanks to you. Why are you not asking him to take you in?" My parents exchanged glances. "Tyler's situation is different," my father said evasively. "Different how?" "Because you gave him nearly $1 million for a mansion while I worked for every cent I have." "That is not fair," my mother protested. "Tyler has different responsibilities. His home is for entertaining clients. It is part of his business image." I laughed incredulously. "And my home is what?" "Disposable." Just something you can take because you decided your other child deserved all your money. Now you're just being selfish, my father said, his voice rising. After everything we have done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked, my own voice getting louder. You did not help with college. You did not help with this house. You have never supported my career or my choices. We put a roof over your head when you were growing up, my father shouted. That is the bare minimum of parenting, I shouted back. And now you want to take the roof I put over my own head? So your answer is no? My father asked, standing up, his face contorted with anger. I stood as well, meeting his gaze. My answer is absolutely not. This is my house. I earned it. I am not giving it to you or anyone else. What happened next would replay in my mind for months afterward. My father stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. The crack of his palm against my cheek echoed through the living room. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. I raised my hand to my stinging cheek. Shock and disbelief washing over me. In 34 years, my father had never struck me. Harold, my mother, gasped, but she made no move to intervene or comfort me. I took a step back, my body trembling with adrenaline and emotion. When I spoke, my voice was eerily calm. Get out of my house now. Brittany, your father did not mean. My mother began. Get out. I pointed to the door, both of you, and do not come back. My father seemed momentarily stunned by his own actions, but his expression quickly hardened again. You will regret this, he said as he headed for the door. We are your parents. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I replied, holding the door. Open, not anymore. As they walked to their car, I noticed my neighbor Diana standing in her front yard watching with concern. She had clearly witnessed at least part of the confrontation. I gave her a small wave to indicate I was okay, then closed and locked my door. Only then did I allow the tears to come. After my parents left, I collapsed onto my couch, my body shaking with sobs. The physical pain of my father's slap was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. For years, I had maintained a relationship with my parents despite their clear favoritism and lack of support. I had told myself that family was family, that deep down they must care about me in their own way. Now that illusion had been shattered completely. When I could finally breathe normally again, I called Allison. Her initial shock quickly turned to fury when I told her what had happened. They did? What? She practically shouted through the phone. They asked you to give them your house, and your father hit you, Brittany. That is assault. You need to file a police report. I do not think I want to do that, I said, touching my still tender cheek. They are still my parents. Parents who tried to take your home and physically attacked you, Alice encountered. This is not normal family dysfunction, Britt. This is abusive and possibly criminal. I promised to think about reporting the incident, but felt too overwhelmed to make any decisions that day. What I did not realize was that my parents' demand and my father's violence were just the beginning of what would become a campaign of harassment. The calls started the very next morning. My mother called first, leaving a voicemail when I did not pick up. Brittany, we need to talk about yesterday. Your father is very sorry he lost his temper, but you need to understand how stressful this situation is for us. Call us back so we can discuss a solution that works for everyone. I deleted the message without responding. An hour later, my father called. His message was less conciliatory. This childish silent treatment is exactly why we have always had to be tougher on you than on Tyler. Call your mother back. She is very upset. By the end of the day, I had received 12 calls from my parents. I blocked their numbers, but that only redirected their efforts. They began emailing me, then showing up at the hospital where I worked. 3 days after their initial demand, I was tending to a young leukemia patient when a nurse poked her head Into the room. Brittany, your parents are at the front desk. They say it is urgent. I felt a surge of anxiety, but kept my expression neutral for my patient's sake. Please tell them I am with a patient and cannot be disturbed. They should leave. A message at reception. When I finished my shift that evening, I found my mother waiting in the hospital parking lot. You cannot avoid us forever, she said, approaching my car. We are your family. Family does not demand that I make myself homeless for their convenience. I replied, unlocking my car door. Please leave me alone, Mom. I mean it. Your father and I raised you better than this. She persisted. We sacrificed everything for you kids. You sacrificed everything for Tyler. I corrected her. I had to fend for myself, and now I am continuing to do exactly that. The situation escalated when Tyler got involved. He began calling and texting, his messages growing increasingly hostile. You always were the selfish one, he wrote. Mom and Dad gave me my house because they know I will take care of them. What are you doing except thinking about yourself? I did not bother, pointing out the irony of him accusing me of selfishness while living in a $1 million home gifted to him by our parents. A week after the initial confrontation, I came home from work to find my front door unlocked. Panic surged through me as I cautiously entered, afraid someone had broken in. Nothing seemed to be missing, but several things had been moved, and there was a cup of coffee on my kitchen counter that I had not left there. I immediately called a locksmith to change all the locks, realizing with horror that my parents must still have the spare key I had given them for emergencies years ago. The thought of them entering my home while I was away made me feel violated and unsafe in my own space. The next day, I installed a security camera system. The day after that, I consulted with a lawyer named Jennifer about my options. What you're describing is harassment, Jennifer told me. After I explained the situation, the unwanted calls showing up at your workplace, and especially entering your home without permission. We can file for a restraining order based on what has happened already. I do not want to go that far yet, I said, still conflicted about taking legal action against my own family. I just want them to leave me alone. I understand, Jennifer replied sympathetically, but sometimes people like this do not stop until they face serious consequences. At minimum, I recommend sending them a cease and desist letter. It has no legal weight by itself, but it establishes a paper trail if we need to take further action. I agreed to the letter, hoping it would be enough to make my parents back off. Jennifer drafted it that same day, and it was delivered by courier to my parents' apartment. Far from deterring them, the letter seemed to infuriate my parents and brother. The harassment intensified. Tyler began spreading lies within our extended family, telling cousins and aunts that I had promised my parents they could live with me. Then Cry changed my mind, leaving them desperate for housing. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, called me in tears. How could you do this to your own parents after everything they have done for you? It was exhausting having to defend myself repeatedly against these false narratives. Some family members believed me, but others sided with my parents, viewing me as the ungrateful child who refused to help when needed. The stress began affecting my work. I found myself distracted, making small mistakes that fortunately were caught before they could impact patient care. Dr. Eleanor noticed the change in my performance and called me into her office. Brittany, you have always been one of our most focused and reliable nurses, she said gently. Something is clearly wrong. Is there anything I can help with? I broke down then, telling her everything. Dr. Eleanor listened without judgment, then offered both practical and emotional support. First, take some personal days, she advised. You need time to deal with this situation properly. Second, document everything, every call, every text, every encounter. And third, Please consider seeing our staff therapist. This kind of family betrayal is traumatic, and you do not have to process it alone. I took her advice on all counts. The brief break from work allowed me to strengthen my home security, adding better outdoor lighting and motion sensors. I started keeping a detailed log of every contact attempt by my family, and I began weekly sessions with Dr. Hernandez, the hospital staff therapist who helped me work through my feelings of guilt, anger, and grief. What you are experiencing is a form of mourning, Dr. Hernandez explained during one session. You are grieving the parents you deserved but never had. That is a legitimate loss. Despite these supports, the harassment continued. My parents began calling my friends, including Allison, trying to get them to pressure me into complying with their demands. They even contacted my neighborhood homeowners association, falsely claiming that I was running an illegal business from my home. Through it all, I held firm in my refusal. This was my home earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. I would not give it up, especially not to people who had shown such little regard for my well-being. What I did not know then was that my family was growing desperate for reasons that went beyond simply wanting my house. The true depths of their scheme were about to be revealed, and the consequences would be far greater than any of us had imagined. Exactly 1 month after my parents' initial demand, I arrived home from an exhausting 12-hour shift to find a scene that made my blood run cold. In my backyard stood my parents, Tyler, and a man I did not recognize who appeared to be working on my back door lock. My security camera notification had alerted me to movement in the yard, but I had assumed it was just the neighbor's cat that occasionally wandered through. I pulled my car into the garage and entered my house through the interior door, then walked straight to the back door and flung it open. All 4 people in my yard froze at the sight of me. What the hell do you think you are doing? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. My father stepped forward, attempting to look authoritative despite being caught in the act of what was essentially a break-in. Brittany, this does not have to be difficult. We are taking possession today. We have given you plenty of time to make arrangements. The man with the tools looked uncomfortable. You said this was your house, he said to my father, that you lost your keys. It is not their house, I said firmly. It is my house. I own it. They are trespassing and they are trying to get you to help them break in. I do not want any part of a family dispute, the man said, gathering his tools. Sort this out amongst yourselves. He quickly departed, leaving me facing my family. You need to leave now, I told them, pulling out my phone, or I am calling the police. Go ahead, Tyler sneered. They will side with Mom and Dad. Who would believe you over your own parents? Something in me snapped. Then, without another word, I dialed 911 and reported a trespassing in progress. When I mentioned that the trespassers were attempting to break into my home, the dispatcher assured me officers would be there shortly. You're really doing this? My mother asked incredulously. Calling the police on your own family? You stopped acting like family when you demanded I give up my home, I replied coldly. And you definitely crossed the line when you brought a blacksmith to break in. We were not breaking in, my father insisted. We were taking what should rightfully be ours. Before I could respond, a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. Officer Marcus Johnson approached the backyard, taking in the scene with a professional demeanor. What seems to be the problem here? He asked. Everyone started talking at once. Officer Johnson held up his hand. One at a time, please. Let's start with who owns this property. I do, I said immediately. I can show you my mortgage documentation. Indeed, she does technically own it. My father interjected, but there are extenuating circumstances. We are her parents, and we need a place to live. She previously agreed to let us move in. That is absolutely false, I said firmly. I never agreed to anything of the sort. They showed up a month ago demanding I sign my house over to them. When I refused, my father slapped me across the face. I have asked them repeatedly to leave me alone, and they have continued to harass me. Today they brought a locksmith to change my locks without my knowledge or permission. Officer Johnson turned to my parents. Is this true? Did you bring someone to change the locks? We need somewhere to live. My mother repeated, avoiding the direct question. We gave everything to help our son, and now we need our daughter to help us. Something in her phrasing caught Officer Johnson's attention. You gave everything to help your son. What exactly does that mean? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. My father shot him a warning glance. We sold our house and helped our son purchase a larger home, my father said carefully. Now we need assistance in return. And this larger home, Officer Johnson continued, where is it located? How large are we talking? That is not relevant, Tyler snapped. My finances are none of your business. Officer Johnson's expression hardened slightly. Sir, I am trying to understand the situation. If your parents gave you their home proceeds and are now attempting to take your sister's home, that context is relevant. They gave him $950,000 for a 5-bedroom mansion in Bellevue, I stated flatly. While I worked and saved for 8 years to afford this house, now they want to take it from me because they gave him everything they had. Officer Johnson's eyebrows raised. He turned back to my parents. Is that accurate? My father's face had gone pale. More or less, he admitted reluctantly. And now you cannot afford housing? Officer Johnson asked. My mother looked at my father nervously. Tyler suddenly appeared very interested in his shoes. There have been some financial complications, my father said vaguely. Tyler's house is in foreclosure. My mother blurted out, ignoring my father's attempt to silence her. We co-signed the mortgage because the bank was concerned about his income verification. Now we are liable too. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This was not just about my parents needing a place to live. This was about them facing financial ruin because of Tyler's irresponsibility and deciding that I should be the one to pay the price. So let me get this straight, Officer Johnson said slowly. You gave your son nearly $1 million for a house he cannot afford. You co-signed a mortgage you cannot cover, and your solution is to take your daughters home from her. Put that way, the absurdity and injustice of their demand was starkly clear. We are her parents, my father insisted, though his voice had lost its confidence. She owes us. Actually, sir, she does not, Officer Johnson replied. Legally, adult children have no obligation to provide housing for their parents. What they do have is the right to not have their property invaded or their locks changed without permission. He turned to me. Do you want to press charges for the attempted break-in? I hesitated, looking at my family. These people who should have loved and protected me were instead trying to make me homeless to save themselves from the consequences of their own poor decisions. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Yes, I said firmly, and I want a restraining order against all three of them. The shock on their faces might have been comical under different circumstances. You cannot be serious, Tyler sputtered. We are your family. Family does not try to make me homeless, I replied. Family does not harass me at work, break into my home, or hit me across the face. You have shown me exactly what kind of family you are, but I want no part of it anymore. Officer Johnson nodded and began the process of documenting the incident. My parents and Tyler were issued trespassing warnings and told to leave the premises immediately or face arrest. The officer also helped me file for an emergency temporary restraining order, which would be followed by a court hearing for a permanent order. As they were escorted off my property, my mother turned back, tears streaming down her face. "Brittany, please, we will lose everything." For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Then I remembered all they had done, not just in the past month, but throughout my life. The consistent favoritism, the lack of support, and now this ultimate betrayal. "You already lost me," I replied quietly. "Everything else is just the consequence of your choices." As their car pulled away, I felt a crushing weight of realization. My family had been willing to make me homeless rather than face the consequences of their own actions. They would have thrown me onto the street without a second thought if it meant saving themselves. I had always known I was second best in their eyes. Now I knew I was nothing to them at all. In the days following the backyard confrontation, I existed in a strange emotional limbo. On one hand, I felt empowered by finally setting a firm boundary with my family. On the other, I grieved the relationship I had always hoped we might someday have. The temporary restraining order provided physical protection, but it could not shield me from the emotional aftermath. A week after the incident, I received a call from Jennifer, my lawyer. "Brittany, something concerning has come up. I have been speaking with some of your relatives as part of preparing for the restraining order hearing, and several of them mentioned something odd." "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself for more family drama. "They seem to believe that your parents loaned you the money for your house," Jennifer said. "Your Aunt Patricia specifically mentioned that your parents had told her they gave you $80,000 for your down payment, which you had promised to repay when they needed it." I was stunned. "That is completely false. I saved every penny myself. They never gave me a dime for this house or anything else." "I thought as much," Jennifer replied. "But the fact that they have been spreading this narrative is concerning. It suggests they might be laying groundwork for a legal claim against your property." Jennifer advised me to gather all documentation related to the purchase of my home, including bank statements showing the source of my down payment. She also suggested we file a formal police report about my father slapping me, which I had previously been reluctant to do. "I understand your hesitation," she said gently, "but we need to establish a pattern of behavior. Their actions are escalating, and I am concerned about what they might try next." I followed her advice, difficult as it was. Filing the police report about the slap made me feel like I was betraying my family, even though they had betrayed me first. But Jennifer was right about the escalation. What had started as an outrageous verbal demand had progressed to harassment, then to an attempted break-in. I needed to protect myself. As I gathered my financial documentation, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Someone had attempted to access my online banking account multiple times. The attempts had been unsuccessful thanks to two-factor authentication, but the timing coincided with my parents' visit to my home when they had used their spare key to enter while I was at work. I reported this to Jennifer immediately, who advised me to check my physical financial documents as well. Sure enough, when I looked through my file cabinet, I noticed subtle signs that someone had been through my papers. Nothing appeared to be missing, but the folders were not in the exact order I always kept them. "They were looking for your house documents," Jennifer concluded. "Possibly your deed or mortgage papers. This is very serious, Brittany. I think we need to speak with the police again." Detective Lawrence Parker was assigned to investigate the potential financial crimes aspect of my case. He was a methodical, soft-spoken man who took detailed notes as I explained the entire situation from the beginning. "So to summarize," he said, after I had finished, "your parents gave your brother nearly $1 million for a house, then demanded you give them your house when they ran into financial trouble. When you refused, they escalated to harassment, attempted breaking and entering, and now possibly attempted financial fraud or identity theft." "That about covers it," I confirmed. "And you believe they may have been searching for your property documents when they entered your home without permission?" "Yes. Jennifer thinks they might have been planning to forge my signature on something. Detective Parker nodded thoughtfully. It would not be the first time we have seen something like that. Family members sometimes believe they can get away with forging signatures because the victim will be reluctant to press charges against family. He advised me to place a fraud alert on my credit and to notify the county recorder's office about the potential for fraudulent documents being filed against my property. Better safe than sorry, he said. As the investigation progressed, my emotional health deteriorated. I found myself struggling with insomnia, jumping at unexpected noises, and constantly checking my security cameras. Dr. Hernandez diagnosed me with acute anxiety and situational depression. What you're experiencing is a normal response to an abnormal situation, he assured me. Your sense of safety and trust has been fundamentally violated by the people who were supposed to protect you. My work performance continued to suffer despite my best efforts. One day after I made a medication dosage error that was fortunately caught by a colleague, Dr. Eleanor called me into her office again. "Brittany, I am concerned about you," she said directly. "You are not yourself, and in our line of work, distraction can have serious consequences." I broke down, then admitting how much the situation was affecting me. Instead of the reprimand I half expected, Dr. Eleanor offered compassion and practical support. "I am putting you on paid leave for 2 weeks," she said. "Not as punishment, but because you need time to take care of yourself and deal with this situation properly. Your job will be waiting when you return." Her kindness was overwhelming after months of conflict with my family. I realized that while my biological family had failed me, I had built a network of people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Allison insisted on staying with me for a few days, bringing groceries and providing both practical help and emotional support. My neighbor Diana brought over homemade meals and sat with me on the porch, her quiet presence more comforting than words could have been. Colleagues from the hospital sent messages of encouragement and offers of help. In the midst of this support, a surprising development occurred. An anonymous tip to the state tax authority triggered an investigation into Tyler's business dealings. Detective Parker informed me that the investigation had uncovered evidence of significant tax fraud, including falsified income statements and improperly claimed deductions. "Here's where it gets complicated," Detective Parker explained during one of our meetings. "The investigation has revealed that some of these fraudulent documents bear your parents' signatures as well. They appear to have been actively involved in helping your brother misrepresent his finances." "Are you saying my parents committed tax fraud?" "The evidence suggests they were at minimum complicit," he confirmed. "And there is more. We have found documentation indicating that the money they gave your brother for his house was reported as a business investment rather than a gift, likely to avoid gift taxes. But there is no legitimate business structure to support that claim. The pieces were falling into place. My parents and brother had been engaged in financial deception for years. The demand for my house had been just the latest in a pattern of entitled fraudulent behavior." 2 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Detective Parker. "Brittany, I wanted to give you a heads up," he said without preamble. "We are executing search warrants on your parents' apartment and your brother's home tomorrow morning. There is substantial evidence of multiple financial crimes, including the attempted property fraud against you. Your parents and brother are in big trouble." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I know," I replied simply. The next day, my parents and Tyler were arrested on multiple charges, including tax fraud, attempted property fraud, and conspiracy. The news hit local papers, bringing the family drama I had tried to keep private into public view. Some family members who had previously sided with my parents reached out to apologize. Others doubled down, blaming me for not handling things within the family. I found I no longer cared much about their opinions. The truth was out, and that was what mattered. As painful as the entire ordeal had been, there was a strange sense of validation in having my experiences officially acknowledged. For once, my parents and Tyler were facing consequences for their actions instead of being rewarded for them. 6 months after my parents and Tyler were arrested, their legal proceedings concluded with plea deals. My father and Tyler received probation and substantial fines for the financial crimes, while my mother received a more lenient sentence due to her secondary role in the fraud. All three were ordered to pay restitution and complete community service. The foreclosure on Tyler's mansion had been finalized, and he was living in a small apartment, working an entry-level job for the first time in his adult life. My parents had moved to a retirement community in Arizona, using what little remained of their savings after legal fees and penalties. As for me, I was slowly rebuilding my life. The permanent restraining order against my family gave me the space to heal without further harassment. I had returned to work at the hospital where Dr. Eleanor had supported my gradual transition back to full duties. "You have shown remarkable resilience," she told me during my performance review. "In fact, I would like to recommend you for the charge nurse position that is opening up next month. Your experience has given you a depth of empathy that makes you an exceptional caregiver." I was touched by her confidence in me. "Do you really think I am ready for that?" "I think you are more than ready," she assured me. "Sometimes going through fire is what forges our strongest qualities." The promotion came through, bringing with it increased responsibilities, but also greater satisfaction in my work. I found purpose in mentoring younger nurses, particularly those who, like me, had overcome personal challenges to pursue their careers. My relationship with my extended family remained complicated. Some relatives made sincere efforts to understand what had happened and to support my decision to maintain the restraining order against my parents and brother. Others continued to pressure me to forgive and forget, not understanding that forgiveness did not require resuming contact with people who had shown no genuine remorse or change. "Forgiveness is for you, not for them," Dr. Hernandez reminded me during one of our now monthly therapy sessions. "It is about releasing the anger and resentment so they do not continue to harm you. It does not mean allowing toxic people back into your life." I had struggled with guilt in the aftermath of their arrests, wondering if I had gone too far in pursuing legal action. Dr. Hernandez helped me recognize that I had not created the situation. I had merely refused to be victimized and had allowed natural consequences to unfold. "Your parents and brother made choices," he pointed out repeatedly. "They chose to give away their financial security. They chose to engage in fraud. They chose to try to take your home. You simply chose not to be their victim." Slowly, I built a new kind of family around me. Allison remained my steadfast best friend, celebrating my victories and supporting me through difficult days. Diana, my neighbor, became something of a surrogate mother figure, sharing her wisdom and unconditional acceptance. I also formed deeper connections with colleagues from the hospital. Dr. Eleanor invited me to family dinners, and several nurses became close friends outside of work. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, and created new traditions. 6 months after my promotion, I hosted a dinner party in my home. Looking around my dining table at the people gathered there, Allison, Diana, Dr. Eleanor, and several friends from work, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. These were people who valued me for who I was, who supported my growth and celebrated my successes without jealousy or conditions. "I would like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To chosen family, to the people who show us what love and support truly mean." As glasses clinketed around the table, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal by my biological family had been devastating, but it had also freed me from the cycle of seeking approval I would never receive. In its place, I had built connections based on mutual respect and genuine care. Later that evening, after my guests had departed, I sat on my porch swing, looking up at the stars. My home remained my sanctuary, a symbol of my independence and resilience. No one could take that from me, not through manipulation, not through force, not through guilt. I had learned painful but necessary lessons about setting boundaries, about recognizing my own worth when others failed to do so, and about the difference between family by blood and family by choice. Most importantly, I have learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. The path forward would not always be easy. There would still be moments of grief for the family relationships I had always wanted but never had. There would be occasions when their absence would be felt keenly, but I would face those moments with the knowledge that I had built a life defined by love and respect rather than obligation and manipulation. As I sat there in the quiet of the evening, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was my home, my life, my choice, and for perhaps the first time, I was truly completely free. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed your boundaries? What did you do and how did it change your relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember that setting healthy boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary for your well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and courage in your own journey.